The transport ship shook hard as it entered the atmosphere of Axiom Prime, and Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest with white knuckles. She had survived worse turbulence before, but that did not make her enjoy it any more than the first time she had felt a ship rattle around her like a dying beast. She looked out the small window and saw the planet below, a world of silver towers and floating platforms, home to the most famous military academy in all the known galaxy. The Galactic Coalition Military Academy had trained warriors from 100 different species for over 300 years. And now it was about to receive something new, a human cadet who weighed barely 60 kilograms and stood shorter than almost every other being who would walk those halls. When the transport landed and the doors opened, Elena stepped out into the bright sunlight. Immediately she felt the stares of dozens of alien eyes upon her, and she heard the whispers that followed her like shadows. Is that the human? So small. How did it even pass the entrance tests? Look at its skin. No scales, no armor, nothing. Elena kept her face calm and her back straight. She had expected this, had prepared herself for weeks of such treatment, and she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch or show any weakness. A massive creature with a hard shell covering its entire body approached her. This was a Krethvar, one of the warrior species that dominated the academy. The alien stood nearly 2.5 meters tall and had 4 arms that ended in claws that could tear through metal. "I am Shalix," the Krethvar said, her voice clicking and buzzing through her mandibles, "and I have been assigned as your bunkmate. Follow me, human." Elena nodded and walked beside the towering alien. Shalix moved with the confidence of someone who had never known what it felt like to be weak, and Elena wondered if the Krethvar had ever experienced fear in her entire life. The dormitory building was enormous, built to house species of all sizes, and Elena's room was on the 3rd floor. When they entered, Elena saw 2 beds, one massive slab of stone for the Krethvar, and one small cot pushed into the corner for the human. "Evaluation week begins tomorrow," Shalix said, turning her large head to look down at Elena with something that might have been pity. "And I must tell you something, human, you will not survive it." "Why do you say that?" Elena asked, her voice steady and calm. "Because the weak are always cold," Shalix replied, "and you are the weakest thing I have ever seen walk into this academy. No offense is meant. It is simply the truth of what you are." Elena said nothing. She simply began to unpack her small bag of belongings, placing her clothes in the tiny drawer beside her cot and setting up her personal items on the shelf above it. Shalix watched her for a moment, then made a sound that might have been a sigh. "The Tyranni will crush you in strength tests. They are 3 times your mass, and their muscles are dense as neutron matter. The Valesi will outrun you and outfight you. They are hunters who can see in complete darkness and move faster than your eyes can track. And my people, the Krethvar, we have armor that your weapons cannot penetrate and strength that could break every bone in your body with a single blow." "I understand," Elena said quietly. "Do you?" Shalix clicked her mandibles in what seemed like frustration. "You are one of only 3 humans ever admitted to this academy. The other 2 withdrew within the first month. Broken and humiliated, what makes you think you will be different?" Elena turned and looked up at the massive alien. Her eyes were dark and calm, like deep water that held secrets in its depths. "I do not think anything. I simply know that I will not leave." The next morning, evaluation week began with a physical assessment. All the cadets gathered in the massive training arena, and Elena found herself surrounded by beings that made her look like a child standing among giants. The Tyranni cadets were walls of muscle and bone, their gray skin stretched tight over bodies that seemed built for nothing but violence. The Valesi were lean and quick, their fur rippling with every movement as their sharp eyes scanned everything around them. The Krethvar stood like living tanks, their exoskeletons gleaming under the arena lights. And then there was Elena, Small, soft, breakable. Commander Vorn entered the arena, and the room fell silent. He was a Tyranni, old and scarred from countless battles, and his voice boomed across the space like thunder. Today you will be tested. Your strength, your speed, your endurance, your combat skills, and by the end of this week, some of you will be gone. The test began, and Elena finished last in almost everything. She could not lift what the Tyranni lifted, could not run as fast as the Valesi, could not endure the punishment that the Krethvar shrugged off like gentle rain. But she did not stop. She did not quit. She simply kept going, kept pushing, kept moving forward, no matter how much her body screamed at her to give up. When the weapons training portion arrived, Commander Vaughn stood before the cadets and gestured to the rack of plasma blades behind him. Each of you will select the weapon. These are standard coalition combat blades, designed for maximum effectiveness against all known species. One by one, the cadets stepped forward and took their weapons. When Elena's turn came, she walked to the rack, looked at the glowing plasma blades, and then turned to face the commander. "Sir, I request permission to use my own weapon." Vorn's scarred face showed surprise. What weapon? Elena reached into her boot and pulled out a simple knife, 8 inches of plain steel. No energy field, no advanced technology, just metal and edge. The arena erupted in laughter. The alien cadets pointed and mocked her, and even Shalix made a sound of disbelief. Commander Vorn raised his hand for silence, then looked at the knife in Elena's hand. "You wish to use that? A primitive blade against enemies with plasma weapons and armored hides?" "Yes, sir." The old Tyranni studied her for a long moment, and something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe recognition of something he could not quite name. "Very well, human. You may use your knife." Elena nodded and returned to her place among the cadets. She held the knife loosely in her hand, feeling its weight, its balance, the way it fit against her palm like an old friend. And for the first time since she had arrived, her hands did not shake. They were perfectly, absolutely still. What no one in that arena knew, what no one could have guessed by looking at her small and fragile form, was that Elena Vasquez had a service record sealed with the highest level of classification the Coalition possessed. And when she held that knife, she was no longer just a fragile human cadet. She was something else entirely, something that the galaxy had tried very hard to forget. The weeks that followed Evaluation Week were harder than Elena had expected, and that was saying something because she had expected them to be very hard indeed. Every morning began with physical training that pushed her body to its absolute limits. Every afternoon brought combat drills, where she was knocked down again and again by opponents who outweighed her by hundreds of kilograms. Every evening she returned to her bunk bruised and exhausted, only to wake up and do it all over again. But the physical challenges were not the worst part. No, the worst part was the cruelty of her fellow cadets. A Valesi named Kithra had decided that Elena was her personal target. Kithra was fast and beautiful in the way that a predator is beautiful, with sleek black fur and eyes that gleamed like polished gold. And she took great pleasure in making the human's life miserable. "Look at the little soft skin," Kithra would say loudly whenever Elena walked past. "So fragile, so weak. I wonder how long before she breaks?" The other cadets would laugh, and Elena would say nothing. She would simply keep walking, keep her head down, keep moving forward. One day in the mess hall, Elena sat alone at a small table eating her rations. Suddenly a shadow fell over her, and she looked up to see Kithra standing there with 3 other Valesi cadets. "You are in my seat, human." "There are many empty seats," Elena replied calmly. Kithra's golden eyes narrowed, and with one swift motion, she knocked Elena's food tray to the floor, sending her meal scattering across the tiles. "I said you were in my seat." Elena looked at the ruined food, then looked up at Kithra. For just a moment, Something flickered in the human's dark eyes, something cold and dangerous. But then it was gone, and Elena simply stood up and walked away without a word. Kithra laughed and called after her, "That is right, little human. Run away like the prey animal you are." But Elena did not run. She walked with the same steady pace she always used, and if anyone had been watching closely, they would have noticed that her hands hung loose and relaxed at her sides, ready for anything. The harassment continued day after day. Cadets would trip Elena in the hallways, steal her equipment during training, and exclude her from study groups and social gatherings. She became a ghost in the academy, present but invisible, enduring but never complaining. Then came the day of the hostage rescue simulation. The exercise was designed to test tactical thinking and close-quarters combat. Each cadet had to move through a building filled with holographic enemies and rescue a simulated hostage within a time limit. The Krethver cadets went first, smashing through walls and crushing enemies with brute force. The Tyranni followed, using their massive bodies as shields while they advanced. The Velesi were next, using their speed to dart through the corridors. When Elena's turn came, the other cadets gathered to watch. Most of them expected entertainment. They wanted to see the weak human fail. The timer started, and Elena entered the kill house. What happened next made no sense to anyone watching. One moment Elena was standing at the entrance, and the next moment she was simply gone. The cameras tracked her movement, but she seemed to flow from shadow to shadow like smoke, never staying one place long enough to be targeted. The holographic enemies fell one by one. Each strike was precise and efficient, targeting weak points that the simulation had not even been programmed to recognize. Elena moved through the building like water flowing downhill, finding the path of least resistance and exploiting every gap in the enemy formation. She completed the course in 47 seconds, faster than any cadet in the history of the Academy. The watching cadets fell silent. Commander Vorn checked the scores 3 times, then announced that there had been a system error and that Elena's time would not be counted. Kithra smirked and made another cruel comment, but some of the other cadets were not laughing anymore. They had seen something they could not explain, and it made them uneasy. 2 days later, a visiting dignitary arrived at the academy. He was an Exari ambassador named Talveth, a member of the 4-armed species that served as diplomats throughout the coalition. He had come to observe the cadets and report on the academy's progress. Elena was in the mess hall when Talveth walked through with Commander Vorn. She kept her head down and focused on her food, trying to be invisible as she always did. But then Talveth stopped walking. His forearms went rigid, and his face turned pale beneath his blue scales. "That human?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why is she here?" Commander Vorn looked at Elena with confusion. "She is Cadet Vasquez. She was admitted through the standard process." "Is there a problem, Ambassador?" Talveth grabbed Vorn's arm with 2 of his hands, pulling the commander close. "Do you not know what she is? Do you not know what she has done?" "She's just a human cadet," Vorn said. "One of the weakest beings in this academy." The ambassador's eyes were wide with what looked very much like fear, and he leaned in close to whisper something into Vorn's ear. Whatever he said made the old Tyranni warrior freeze, and his scarred face went gray. Talveth released Vorn and backed away. "I will not stay in the same building as that creature. Contact me when she is gone." The ambassador left quickly, almost running, and Vorn stood motionless for a long moment. Then he turned and looked at Elena, really looked at her for the first time since she had arrived. Elena met his gaze calmly, then returned to eating her meal as if nothing had happened. That night, Commander Vorn sat in his office and accessed the Coalition military database. He entered his highest clearance codes and searched for the file on Cadet Elena Vasquez. What he found made his blood run cold. Most of the file was redacted, entire sections blacked out with security classifications he did not have access to. But a few fragments remained visible, scattered words and phrases that told a story he did not want to believe. Sole survivor. 2 words that explained nothing and everything at once. Kessler Station incident. A name he had heard whispered in military circles, always followed by silence and changed subjects. Combat style. RES-7, prohibited. This phrase he had to look up in a separate database, and what he found there made him push back from his desk and stare at the wall for a very long time. Ares-7 was not just a fighting technique. It was a weapon created during humanity's darkest hour, designed to kill species stronger, larger, and better armored than humans. It was so effective and so brutal that the post-war Galactic Accords had banned its teaching and practice in 12 star systems. And somehow, this small and fragile human girl knew it. Vorm closed the file and sat in the darkness of his office, thinking about what he had learned. Then he made a decision. The next morning, Elena woke to find that her bunk had been moved. She was no longer sharing a room with Shalix, but had been given a private quarters at the far end of the dormitory hall. Shalix seemed relieved by the change, and Elena understood why. The Krethver had sensed something, even if she did not know exactly what. Elena unpacked her few belongings in her new room, placed her knife on the shelf beside her bed, and looked out the window at the academy grounds. She had kept her secret for years, buried it deep inside herself where no one could see. But secrets had a way of rising to the surface, and Elena knew that hers would not stay hidden forever. Somewhere out there, Kithra was planning more cruelty, more humiliation. Somewhere out there, Commander Vorm was trying to understand what he had discovered. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was watching. And Elena Vasquez stood at her window, calm and patient, waiting for whatever would come next. Kithra had grown tired of simple humiliation. The human refused to break, refused to cry, refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing weakness. Every insult, every stolen meal, every act of cruelty had been met with the same calm silence, and it was driving Kithra mad. She needed to see the human suffer, needed to prove once and for all that soft-skinned creatures did not belong among real warriors. So she made a plan. The advanced combat examination was scheduled for the end of the month. It was a live sparring event where cadets would face each other in controlled fights, with safety protocols in place to prevent serious injury. But safety protocols could be disabled if one knew the right codes. Kithra spent 3 days gathering information. She bribed a maintenance technician for the arena control codes. She convinced 3 Krethver cadets to participate in her scheme. And she arranged for the instructors to be delayed with a false emergency report. When the day of the examination arrived, everything was in place. Elena walked into the training arena with the other cadets. She wore her standard training uniform and carried her simple steel knife at her belt. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Kithra stepped forward and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. The human should go first. Let us see what the soft skin can do against real warriors. Commander Vorm was not present. He had been called away to deal with the fake emergency, and the junior instructor in charge saw no reason to refuse the request. Elena was directed to enter the sparring ring, a circular platform, surrounded by energy barriers that would normally absorb any blow that went too far. 3 Krethver cadets entered the ring with her. They were massive, each one standing over 2 meters tall, their exoskeletons gleaming under the arena lights like living armor. "This is a 3-on-1 match?" Elena asked the junior instructor. Before the instructor could answer, Kithra pressed a hidden control on her wrist device. The safety barriers flickered and died, and the weapons the Krethver carried began to glow with live energy. "What is happening?" One cadet shouted. "System malfunction." Kithra said with a cruel smile. "It seems the safety protocols have failed. How unfortunate." Elena looked at the three Krethver surrounding her. Their eyes showed no mercy, only the promise of violence. Kithra had obviously promised them something valuable in exchange for hurting the human. "You do not have to do this," Elena said quietly, her voice calm and steady. The largest Krethver, a cadet named Brack, clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter. "We've been waiting for this, Softskin. Today we show everyone what happens to prey animals who think they can be warriors." Elena's hand moved to her knife, but she did not draw it yet. "I'm asking you one more time, stand down." "Make us?" Brack roared, and all three Krethver charged at once. What happened next lasted exactly 11 seconds. Elena did not try to block or deflect. She flowed like water, sliding between the massive bodies of her attackers with movements that seemed impossible for something made of flesh and bone. Her knife cleared its sheath, and suddenly there was blood in the air. Not human blood, but the thick blue fluid that flowed through Krethver veins. The first attacker fell when Elena's blade found the soft tissue between his arm plates. The knife severed tendons with surgical precision, and his weapon clattered to the ground as his arm went limp. The second attacker swung a massive fist at her head, but Elena was already moving. She ducked under the blow and drove her knife into the nerve cluster at the back of his knee, a weakness that no one outside of human combat specialists had ever thought to exploit. The Krethver screamed and collapsed, his leg unable to support his weight. Brack was the last one standing. He was smarter than his companions, more careful, and he approached Elena with his guard up. "What are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking for the first time. Elena did not answer. She simply moved. Brack never saw the strike that took him down. Elena's knife found the seam where his chest plate met his shoulder armor, slipping through the gap like it had been designed for exactly this purpose. She twisted the blade, and something inside Brack's exoskeleton cracked. He fell to his knees, gasping in shock and pain. Elena stood among the three fallen Krethver, her knife dripping blue blood onto the floor. She was not even breathing hard, and her face showed no emotion at all. The arena was completely silent. Every cadet, every instructor, everyone who had watched was frozen in place, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Kithra's golden eyes were wide with disbelief and fear. She had expected to see Elena beaten and broken, not standing victorious over three of the strongest cadets in the academy. The doors burst open and Commander Vorn rushed in. He took one look at the scene, the disabled safety barriers, the three wounded Krethver, the small human standing calm and bloody in the center of it all, and his scarred face went hard. "What happened here?" "The human attacked us," Brack groaned from the floor. "She is insane." Vorn looked at Elena, and something passed between them, an understanding that did not need words. "The safety protocols were deliberately disabled," Vorn said slowly, "and three armed Krethver faced one human with a knife. And you expect me to believe she attacked you?" Brack fell silent. Vorn turned to address the entire arena, his voice booming like thunder. "Cadet Vasquez defended herself against an ambush. Anyone who says otherwise can explain their version to me in private. Now someone call the medical team." As the medics rushed in to treat the wounded, Vorn approached Elena. He looked at the knife in her hand, still wet with blood, and then at her face. "You did not kill them," he said quietly so only she could hear. "No, sir." "You could have." Elena met his eyes, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. He saw something in her gaze that was old and tired and full of memories that no one should have to carry. "I chose not to. I always choose not to, when I can." Vorn nodded slowly. "RES-7. Elena's hand tightened on her knife. "You found my file." "What I could read of it. Most was classified beyond my clearance." but I found enough to understand what you are."
"And what is that, Commander?"
Vaughn looked at the 3 massive Krethver being carried out on stretchers, warriors who should have crushed this small human without effort, and he chose his words carefully. "You are someone who should never have had to become what you became, and I'm sorry for that." Elena said nothing. She simply cleaned her knife on her uniform and returned it to its sheath. Kithra tried to slip away, but Vorn's voice stopped her cold. "Cadet Kithra, you will remain here. We will discuss your role in today's events." The Valesi's face went pale beneath her black fur. Elena walked out of the arena alone. The other cadets parted before her like water before the bow of a ship, and no one tried to stop her. No one spoke. No one even breathed too loudly. She returned to her quarters, sat on her bed, and looked at her hands. There was blood under her fingernails, blue blood from creatures she had hurt but not killed. 11 seconds. That was all it had taken to change everything. The fragile human cadet was gone. In her place was something the galaxy had tried very hard to forget, something that made warriors tremble and ambassadors flee. Elena Vasquez closed her eyes and remembered Kessler Station, remembered the screams and the blood and the endless night that had made her what she was. She had not wanted to reveal herself, had hoped to complete her training quietly and disappear into the ranks of the coalition military. But some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some monsters cannot hide forever. Tomorrow would bring questions and tribunals and demands for answers. Tomorrow she would have to explain what she was and how she had come to be. But tonight, Elena simply sat in silence, her knife resting on the shelf beside her, and waited for the storm she knew was coming. Elena sat in a small room with gray walls and a single door. This was a detention cell, though it was clean and comfortable enough. She had been here for 3 days, waiting for the tribunal that would decide her fate. They had taken her knife when they brought her here. She missed its weight at her belt, the comfort of knowing it was there. But she understood why they had done it. After what she had shown them in the arena, they were afraid of what she might do. The door opened and a guard stepped in, a Tarani with arms like tree trunks and eyes that never stopped watching her. "The tribunal is ready for you. Follow me." Elena stood and walked with the guard through the corridors of the administration building. Other cadets and staff stopped to stare as she passed, whispering to each other. "That is her, the one who defeated 3 Krethver. I heard she killed them." "No, they are alive, but they say she could have killed them easily." Elena ignored the whispers and kept walking. The tribunal chamber was a large room with a high ceiling. At one end sat 5 senior officers from different species, 2 Tarani, 1 Krethver, 1 Valesi, and 1 Nexari. These were the judges who would hear her case. Commander Vaughn stood to one side, his face unreadable. Elena was directed to stand in the center of the room, facing the judges. She clasped her hands behind her back and waited. The lead judge, an old Tarani woman with silver scales and cybernetic eyes, spoke first. "Cadet Elena Vasquez, you are here to answer for the events that occurred during the advanced combat examination. 3 cadets were seriously injured by your actions. How do you respond?" "I defended myself, Admiral. I used only the force necessary to stop the attack." "The force necessary?" The Krethver judge interrupted, his voice sharp with anger. "You crippled 3 of my species in 11 seconds. One may never use his arm again." Elena met his eyes without flinching, with respect. "Judge, those 3 cadets entered a ring with disabled safety protocols, carrying live weapons, intending to harm me. I gave them a chance to stand down, and they refused." "So you say?" Commander Vaughn stepped forward. "I have evidence supporting Cadet Vasquez's account. Security footage shows Cadet Kithra disabling the safety barriers, and testimony from other cadets confirms that the attack was premeditated." The judges exchanged glances. The Nexari judge, a four-armed being who reminded Elena uncomfortably of Ambassador Talveth, leaned forward. This brings us to the real question. How did a human cadet with no special augmentations and carrying only a primitive blade defeat 3 armored Krethver warriors? Silence filled the chamber. The Nexari continued. We have accessed what records we could find on you, Cadet Vasquez. Most of your file is sealed at the highest classification level, but we found references to something called a RES-7, a combat style that is prohibited in 12 star systems. Elena said nothing. Commander Vaughn has requested permission to explain, the Admiral said, and we have granted it. Commander, please proceed. Vaughn stepped into the center of the room and addressed the tribunal with the grave tone of someone delivering news of a death. What I am about to tell you is not widely known, and there are reasons for that. But given the circumstances, I believe the truth must be spoken. He took a deep breath and began. 30 years ago, humanity made first contact with the galaxy, not peacefully, but through invasion. The Dreth hegemony attacked Earth colony on Mars, killing millions and taking the rest as slaves. Everyone in the room knew this history, but they listened in silence. Humanity had no warships, no plasma weapons, no shields, nothing that could match the Dreth in open combat. We were outmatched in every way that seemed to matter. Vaughn's voice grew heavier, but humans did not surrender. They could not accept defeat. Instead, they developed something new, something terrible. RES-7, Elena said quietly. Vaughn nodded. A RES-7, nicknamed the Kessler Doctrine. It was a close combat system designed for one purpose: to allow unaugmented humans to kill species larger, stronger, and better armored than themselves. The judges shifted uncomfortably. The system focused on universal biological weaknesses, joints, nerve clusters, sensory organs, the soft places where armor cannot fully protect. It was designed to be learned quickly and used effectively by soldiers with no special abilities except determination and the willingness to get close to their enemies. How close? The Krethver judge asked. Close enough to smell their breath, Vaughn replied. Close enough to feel their fear. He paused to let that sink in, then continued. Human soldiers armed with nothing but knives and training boarded Dreth vessels during the war. They moved through corridors too small for the aliens to maneuver effectively, and they killed with precision that the Dreth could not comprehend. But that is not all, Vaughn said, his voice dropping lower. E7 was designed to be psychologically devastating as well. The aliens had never faced enemies who fought like this, who could be so small and soft, yet so incredibly lethal. The Dreth began to fear humans in a way they had never feared any other species. The Admiral spoke. The Dreth surrendered after only 2 years of fighting. Their military leaders stated that they could not continue the war against an enemy who was, and I quote, already inside our ships before we knew they were coming. Yes, Vaughn agreed. But the rest of the galaxy was disturbed by what humanity had created. The Galactic Accords banned the teaching and practice of Ares-7 in 12 star systems. And humanity agreed to the ban in exchange for full membership in the coalition. So how? The Nexari judge demanded. Does this young human know a prohibited combat style? Vaughn turned to Elena, and his eyes were full of something that might have been sorrow, because she learned it the only way anyone learns RE7 anymore, through necessity, through blood and terror and the desperate need to survive. Elena finally spoke, and her voice was steady even as the memories pressed against her mind like a weight. Kessler Station was a mining colony in the Outer Reach. 6,000 colonists lived there, including my family. I was 14 years old when the pirates came. The tribunal fell absolutely silent. They were not Dreth. They were a mixed crew of different species, and they had come to take everything. Our supplies, our equipment, our people. They thought it would be easy because we were just civilians, Just soft humans with no weapons and no warriors. Elena's hands tightened behind her back. My father was a veteran of the Dreth War. He had served on the boarding teams, and he had kept his training alive even after the ban. When the pirates broke through our defenses, he gave me his knife and told me what to do. He taught you a RES-7? The Valesi judge asked. He gave me the basics in 10 minutes, Elena replied. Then he went to buy time for the others to escape. He did not come back. Her voice remained steady, but something in her eyes had gone very far away. I spent 3 days in the maintenance tunnels of Kessler Station with that knife. The pirates searched for survivors, and I did what I had to do. You killed them, the Admiral said softly. I survived them, Elena corrected. And by the time Coalition rescue ships arrived, the pirates who were left had locked themselves in their own ship because they were afraid to come out. She met the eyes of each judge in turn. I was 14 years old. I weighed 40 kilograms. And I made a crew of armed pirates barricade themselves in their vessel rather than face me. That is what a RES-7 can do. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, the Admiral spoke. The question before this tribunal is whether you should be punished for the injuries you caused during the examination. With respect, Admiral, Commander Vorn said, Cadet Vasquez was attacked by 3 armed opponents in a rigged situation. She used her training to defend herself, and she showed remarkable restraint by not killing her attackers. The Krethver judge made a harsh clicking sound. Restraint. She maimed them. She could have killed them in less than 5 seconds. Vorm replied. Instead, she took 11 seconds to disable them without fatal injuries. Every extra second she took was a choice not to kill. The judges conferred quietly among themselves. Then the Admiral raised her hand for silence. Cadet Elena Vasquez, this tribunal finds that you acted in legitimate self-defense. You are cleared of all charges and may return to your training. Elena nodded once. Thank you, Admiral. As she turned to leave, the Admiral's voice stopped her. Cadet, the galaxy tried to bury what humanity created during the war. But perhaps some things should not be forgotten entirely. Perhaps there is still a need for what you can do. Elena looked back over her shoulder. I hope there will never be such a need again, Admiral. But even as she said the words, she knew that hope was a fragile thing, and the galaxy was full of dangers that did not care about hope at all. After the tribunal, everything changed. The cadets who had mocked Elena now avoided her entirely. They pressed themselves against walls when she passed, and conversation stopped when she entered rooms. Fear had replaced contempt, and Elena was not sure which was worse. Kithra had been expelled from the academy. Her scheme to hurt Elena had been exposed in full, and the Valesi had left Axiom Prime in disgrace. Elena felt no satisfaction at this news. She had never wanted any of this. Even Shalix, her former bunkmate, kept her distance. The Krethver would nod politely when they encountered each other, but the easy conversation they had once shared was gone. Elena was alone, surrounded by people but connected to none of them. Commander Vorn was the only one who treated her the same as before. He pushed her hard in training, demanded excellence, and showed her no special favor or fear. In some ways, he was the closest thing she had to a friend. You cannot blame them, Vorn told her one evening after a particularly grueling session. They have spent their whole lives believing that size and strength determine who wins a fight. You showed them that everything they believed was wrong. I never wanted to show them anything, Elena replied. I just wanted to be a soldier. You are a soldier, Vorn said, and perhaps more than that. Time will tell. 3 weeks after the tribunal, time told its story. The alarm came at midnight, a sound that Elena had never heard before, a deep pulsing tone that meant only one thing: enemy attack. She was out of bed and dressed in seconds, her knife at her belt, her body ready for whatever was coming. She ran through the corridors and emerged into chaos. The night sky above Axiom Prime was on fire. Coalition defense platforms were exploding one by one, their burning debris falling toward the planet like shooting stars. And descending through the destruction came ships that Elena recognized from her darkest nightmares. Dreth warships, a splinter fleet from the remnants of the hegemony. All cadets to defensive positions. Commander Vaughan's voice boomed across the campus. This is not a drill. The enemy has breached orbital defenses and boarding parties are incoming. Elena joined the stream of cadets rushing toward the armory. All around her, beings that had mocked her and feared her were now running alongside her, united by the common enemy. The first Dreth landed before anyone reached the weapons. They came down in drop pods that smashed through the Academy's outer walls. The aliens were huge, covered in spiked armor, their forearms ending in claws that dripped poison. They were everything the galaxy had learned to fear during the war. Plasma rifles crackled and energy shields flared, but the Dreth kept coming. They were bred for war, designed for slaughter, and the cadets, for all their training, were not ready. Elena watched a Tarani cadet fall, watched a Valese scream as poison claws found her flesh, watched the organized defense crumble into scattered chaos. And then she stopped watching. A knife cleared its sheath, and Elena Vasquez moved into the fight. She was small and fast, too quick for the Dreth to track in the confusion of battle. She slipped between their massive bodies like a ghost, and her blade found every weakness they possessed. Joint seams cut, nerve clusters severed, sentry stalks destroyed. The first Dreth fell, then the second, then the third. Elena moved through them like a dancer, performing a routine she had practiced 1,000 times. And everywhere she went, the enemy died. A group of first-year cadets had been cornered against the wall. They were young and terrified, some of them wounded, all of them certain they were about to die. Elena appeared between them and the Dreth like an answer to a prayer they had not known they were making. "Stay behind me," she said, and her voice carried more authority than her small body should have been able to produce. The Dreth facing her was a warlord, larger than the others, older, scarred from countless battles. He looked at Elena and laughed, a horrible grinding sound. "One soft human?" His translator growled. "The Coalition sends children to fight us now?" Elena did not answer with words. She simply raised her knife. The warlord attacked with all four arms at once, poison claws slashing through the air fast enough to cut through steel. But Elena was not there. She had moved the instant he committed to the attack, sliding past his guard like smoke through a cracked window. Her knife found the gap in his armor where the helmet met the neckplate as she drove it home. The warlord's eyes went wide. "One is enough," Elena said softly, and pulled her blade free. The massive Dreth fell, and his warriors hesitated for the first time. They had never seen one of their leaders die so quickly, so easily, killed by a being they could crush with one hand. "Who else?" Elena asked, and her voice was cold. The Dreth looked at her, really looked at her, and they saw what Kessler Station had made, what the war had created, what humanity had become. They saw death wearing the face of a fragile girl. The fight did not end there, but it turned. Where Elena went, others followed. Cadets who had never known how to fight in close quarters learned from watching her, picking up techniques in the heat of battle that would normally take months to master. She showed them how to strike at joints. She showed them how to use their size, or lack of it, as an advantage. She showed them that courage was more important than strength, and that the will to survive could defeat any enemy. By dawn, the Dreth assault had failed. Coalition reinforcements had arrived, driving the splinter fleet back into the darkness between stars. And the Academy still stood, battered but unbroken. Elena stood in the courtyard with the other survivors. She was covered in blood, most of it blue, some of it red, and exhaustion pulled at her bones like gravity had doubled. Commander Vaughn approached her. His arm was in a sling and his face was grim, but he was alive, and that counted for something. "The brass will want a report," he said. "They will want to know how a cadet academy held against a Drath assault." Elena wiped her knife clean on her uniform and returned it to its sheath. "Tell them the truth." "And what is the truth?" She looked around at the cadets who had survived, the Krethvar and Tarani and Valesi who had fought beside her, who had followed her into the worst night of their lives and come out the other side. They were watching her now, but not with fear. They watched her with something that looked almost like respect. "Tell them a human was here," Elena said. Vaughn nodded slowly, and something that might have been a smile crossed his scarred face. "I think I finally understand what a RES-7 really is." "What do you mean?" "It is not just a combat style," the old warrior said. "It is a message. It tells the galaxy that no matter how small or weak or fragile you might think humans are, you should never, ever underestimate what they can become." Elena thought about that for a moment, thought about Kessler Station and her father and the endless night that had forged her into a weapon. "We are what the galaxy made us," she said finally, "and we do not break easily." Across the courtyard, Shalix caught her eye. The Krethvar nodded once, not with fear, not with pity, but with the acknowledgement of one warrior to another. Elena nodded back. The sun rose over Axiom Prime, painting the wounded academy in shades of gold and red. There would be funerals to attend, wounds to heal, walls to rebuild. There would be questions and investigations and medals for those who deserved them. But for now, Elena simply stood in the light, surrounded by beings who finally understood what humans were for. They were small and soft and fragile, and they were absolutely terrifyingly, magnificently dangerous. And the galaxy would never forget it.